Hello there, and welcome to Weird Music on the Glumberger channel. This is of course that show where that very weird presenter, just talks about a different album each and every week for some reason, right? So today we are returning to the randomizer, which is completely chock-a-block full of all of your suggestions, as you can see, that you've been making for the past couple of years essentially, and I have to say, thanks to this randomizer, which I should have been doing way sooner, I think, I'm finally able to work through some of the many requests I've been getting for this show, instead of just doing that ADHD thing of just getting overwhelmed by the amount of requests, letting them all pile up and ignoring every single one, essentially. Today, we've got a very interesting album. Today's request comes from channel supporter Triz Mamon, who, in a comment on our video for Shushu, asked if I was at all familiar with the Vaporwave scene. And so, today, for you wonderful audience of weird music, it's time for you to discover just how completely out of my depth I am when it comes to this genre, as I genuinely have absolutely no clue what I am talking about. To make things worse though, this album that we're looking at within the Vaporwave genre is barely comprehensible. So, enough waffling, let's just get started, shall we? Today I present Freed from the World by New Life Deluxe. Right. So, let's ask ourselves, who is New Life Deluxe? Well, some digging around tells me that New Life Deluxe is one of a dozen monikers for musician, producer, and enigmatic person Robin Burnett from Dallas, Texas, apparently, who seems to be more often referred to as Internet Club, which from my research seems to be one of the earliest Vaporwave projects, and along with many others, of course, don't get me wrong. And it seems that Burnett, though, is apparently responsible for the term Vaporwave, the term itself, according to the Vaporwave wiki, which was a great source of info for me for this whole video, by the way, as they sort of used it as a genre descriptor to bring together a bunch of different projects by various producers at the time. And so, yep, New Life Deluxe. This is one of many different monikers under the Internet Club, with its debut release being the very one we're looking at today, Freed from the World, a Vaporwave album that falls under the broken transmission subgenre, an entire album, an entire genre to be fair, that's sort of, generally centered around television samples and, these sort of faulty signal. I mean, I don't know what I'm talking about, am I? But it's one of those genres that, it makes sense, like the name makes sense, it just explains it all, essentially. So, what is Freed from the World? Well, this is a nonsensical, jarring album experience that builds upon the forms and conventions of the Vaporwave genre. Using obscure samples, remixing them, reformatting them, yada yada yada. Just generally changing it all into something new. Only on this album, it seems the entire thing has been done in this incredibly erratic fashion that results in one of the most confounding albums I have ever listened to, I feel. This album is so weird in just how it straddles the line between being everything that the Vaporwave genre is about, as well as sounding absolutely nothing like it at all. It's almost like a complete bastardization of everything the genre stands for, almost. So it just completely overloads you as a listener, you know, with short static bursts of daytime television, making you feel like you're slowly losing your mind as you descend further and further into the album's madness. I just can't even with this, like, I can't even with this album. Like, where'd you even begin? Like, oh, this album genuinely just breaks me when I try to listen to it, because there's just so much going on, and it's almost caustic and just uncomfortable listening to this. This entire review is going to be incredibly erratic, much like the album itself, to be fair, as it's just this whole review is just going to be a smorgasbord of me just trying to comprehend my opinions and understanding of what I'm feeling, essentially. Let's talk a bit about Vaporwave, to be fair. Let's talk about my understanding of the genre, because my understanding of Vaporwave is incredibly limited, as I did mention earlier. There's been an old couple of albums from the genre that I've quite liked and enjoyed, to be fair. I was introduced to the Vaporwave genre from watching videos by Chad Pennington, who is probably one of the leading people in the foray of just presenting Vaporwave music to the internet, essentially, just getting the word out there about exciting albums within the genre. And one of the biggest things I've enjoyed from discovering it through Pennington is the albums of ethereal media, essentially. I think, in my opinion, one of the best signal wave artists within the scene, actually. I feel you get their albums, just chilled out, broken transmissions from abandoned locations in the future. And yeah, ever since first discovering the first ethereal media album, I've just really liked what they've been doing with the genre. It's very relaxing, ambient, chill out, broken signal kind of music. It's great. We might try to cover them in a future episode one day, maybe. But to be fair, that is probably as far as my understanding really goes, bar the odd album here or there. And so when it comes to this album, Free From The World by New Life Deluxe, this is a complete head-scratcher of an album for me, as I find it completely overloading and bombarding with its constantly glitching loop samples and just caustic noise and just a rhythmic, nonsensical structures, essentially. It just confuses me far too much, I feel. Maybe even more so than some of the really janky noise records that we've looked at in previous episodes, which is quite weird. And it's when it comes to this one, it's so bad for me that I can't even listen to the whole album when trying to sit down and write my thoughts about it. Like, when it comes to writing the reviews for these episodes, essentially, I like to sit down, have the album playing, write about it all, yada yada yada. But when it comes to this one, and to be fair, this has come up a few times in previous episodes as well, but especially with this album, I've noticed this is the worst I've ever experienced this, but I get so completely overloaded that I can't comprehend what I'm trying to think, and trying to write it down just doesn't work. Just overloaded to the point of incomprehensibility, it seems. But to be fair, that's kind of interesting and fascinating, isn't it? And so, what is happening on this album then? What's going on? Why is this so weird? It's kind of hard to say, because like I said, I don't really know the Vaporwave genre, yada yada, but essentially what I think we've got here is that classic Vaporwave method of, taking obscure samples, which in this case is of Japanese media sourced mostly from old television commercials, I assume. And, you take those samples and, just structure the album. And what makes the album interesting, though, is the incredibly idiosyncratic nature, though, of the entire thing, as instead of utilising the loops to create these, gentle passages, these sort of beats and music and things like that, you just get overloaded with repetitive loops that feel like you're pressing the same key over and over and over on your sampler again. Kind of like Gene from Bob's Burgers when he just starts pressing a button on his keyboard, essentially. And what you're left with is this peculiar effect where it feels like you're completely hungover and strung out, sprawled out on your sofa in the dead of the nighttime, illuminated by an analog television set that's failing to even transmit its broadcast to you, and instead just resulting in this incredibly weird, glitchy experience that you're just too tired to go and turn off. So instead, you just let yourself get bombarded by the constantly glitching television, essentially. It's so weird, as everything just proceeds along on this album with no real coherent structure, it feels. You'll go from sample to sample to repetition of a sample, sudden detuning and manipulation, catching it all in weird filters as it shifts and morphs it into something even more twisted, before it then suddenly just steps sharply to the left into something even more ridiculous. It's a completely unpredictable album that I find impossible to dissect song by song, as it just all runs into each other into this overloading bombardment of an album that lasts about 20 minutes, I say. But to be fair, it lasts 20 minutes, but it feels so much longer listening to this thing. It's one of those weird things again. And so, although I often say, when I say with these albums it's hard to dissect song by song, there's always a couple I like to mention, and there is one I really want to mention on this album, though, as I mean, I can't even name the album because all the names are just weird and stuff. Anyway, but I want to discuss this one because a very weird thing happened when I sat down to when I first heard this one, essentially, and that is track 9. This is incidentally the longest track on the album, by the way, at 4.5 minutes in length. Proceeds along like a broken video transmission while somebody plays the piano in the attic, it feels like. And you're getting this constantly glitching intermittent vocal sample, appearing with no form or structure alongside the incredibly janky detuned piano melody, if you want to call it that. But when it comes to this track, what kind of freaks me out, because the whole thing freaks me out is what it is. And because I swear that my brain, in a desperate attempt to interpret and understand the nonsense that I'm hearing, especially on this track, especially with that vocal sample, I swear my brain interprets it all as hearing my own name being said over and over again ad nauseum. I listen to this track and I could just interpret that vocal sample as just saying my name, Gareth, or whatever it is. It just doesn't make any sense. Of course, this isn't what's being said. Don't get me wrong, don't be gay. I am not that much of a narcissist, trust me. But what I think is interesting is that it just might be an effect of this incredibly strange music that it's having upon me. Myself hearing what I think is being heard, if that makes sense, rather than what's actually being produced by the sounds themselves. And maybe this is happening to me because I have no context for what I'm listening to, especially with being sourced from such obscure samples and stuff, which, to be fair, also many of which still haven't been discovered to this day. There's a bunch that have been discovered what the samples come from, but still a bunch are very unknown. But as me personally, as a listener of this, my brain is just basically listening to this all, trying desperately to attach some semblance of understanding to what it is I'm hearing, and as a result, it's the only thing it can attach itself to is that vocal sample and interpret it as being my name, which is really confusing and really disorientating for me personally to hear. I think what's happening is, when you're listening to stuff like this, your brain just delves deep into your memory to try pull something out that it can compare it to that it sounds like, which in this case was my name for some reason. Genuinely incredibly weird, but I also think there's something kind of funny about this kind of weird existential crisis I'm having listening to this song, just going, what's going on? But I just had to mention it because it was so bizarre. So, I don't even think I can summarise this one properly as well. I've written a couple of thoughts though. Much like when we had a dive into the likes of tape-wrangled noise excursions, the cassette releases, stuff like Imminent Waterboard's Anxiety Music by Territorial Gobbing, or even the Japanoise freakouts of Tokyo Anal Dynamite by the Gorogori Gay, or even the experimental vocal chopping of Inshallah Halaland by Saint Abdullah. Even you know, the crazy electroacoustic math rock of Cheval de Frise on their self-titled album. These albums, which I'm going to draw some comparisons to, these albums and today's album, Free From The World by New Life Deluxe, all vastly different albums to each other, of course, but I think they all have one thing in common. That is that they are all just this complete overload of audio stimulus to the point of incomprehension. And especially on an album like this one, I feel like it's all been done on purpose. All done to create this incredibly weird excursion that places you into this weird late-night television viewing experience as the faulty TV just fucks up the transmission ad nauseum. And it becomes completely nonsensical, but perhaps maybe that's where the brilliance of this album lies. It's one of those albums that, for better or for worse, it all depends on how you end up, receiving the album, if that makes sense. But for better or for worse, it is an incredibly unique album experience that will conjure up the kind of story that only it can present. And in a weird way, this album, a lot of this, what's happening on this album, it does remind me, most of In Shahala Halaland by Saint Abdullah, which was a very funny album to dive into when we looked at it in a previous episode of Weird Music, as it had some lovely moments scattered within its idiosyncratic presentation. And Freed From The World, it kind of does similar things in my eyes, albeit within the Vaporwave genre, it feels, and it still tells its own unique story in the process, Across all the different tracks, you're confronted with all this whole host of moods and atmospheres ranging from chill out to ominous to creepy to arguably frustrating and in some cases annoying as hell. But even when this album is at its most annoying, it's also incredibly funny. And I don't know for sure if it's just funny because of how it sounds or because it's poking fun at the Vaporwave genre in general, I don't know, but I just find it amusing on some level, and I feel like I'm supposed to. You're supposed to just be amused by this very weird, strange, esoteric journey, essentially, and maybe that's where the brilliance of this album lies. And to be fair as well, when it comes to this album is weirdly popular. Like, you can scroll through the many different comments on Bandcamp and just see people that just sort of have this incredibly unusual fascination and appreciation for this really strange album that is just so bizarre and caustic and weird, but also funny. And, it's like when we were discussing Saint Abdullah, like in the very notes they said in their album, for In Shahala Halaland. Sometimes things are funny, and it's okay for things to be funny. It's okay to laugh at things because, laughter is a genuine emotion that is worth feeling and stuff, I feel like, this is going to be a bit off script and stuff, but I feel like when it comes to a lot of the albums I like to review on this show, an awful lot, I always tend to delve into, these very, dark emotional albums it feels, like stuff that really makes me feel stuff. And something I tend to kind of ignore is humour, I feel. Like, it's not that I don't like humour at all. I love to laugh, essentially. I'm always laughing at stuff. But when it comes to music that is full of humour and stuff, it's not something I ever go for as much, I feel, for some reason. But, it's a great thing to express, especially when you do it perfectly and you make an album that is just genuinely quite funny for what it is, if that makes sense. And I think Free From The World does do a very good job of it. It's, like I said, it's so frustrating at times, but that's kind of the brilliance of it, the sort of schadenfreude of just listening to an album that is frustrating. But it is funny. And funny is good, of course. I don't know if I've explained that all well, but whatever. So yeah, I think with that, we might as well just come to the end of our episode of Weird Music there. I'm genuinely at loss for words when it comes to this album. It's such a fun and erratic ride into the madness of television and sampling hell, it feels, designed to just confuse its audience, I feel, I'd argue. But I'm actually quite surprised at how much I had to say about this album, though, Yeah. But I also feel like, considering, as I have such little understanding of the genre, All I've managed to do in this episode is just ramble as incomprehensibly as this very album does, right? Maybe that's funny, who knows, who knows, who knows. Like, maybe this whole episode is just a complete waste of time, but whatever. It is what it is, isn't it? So, huge thank you to Trismamone for suggesting this one. A huge fan of the Vaporwave genre, it seems, who probably would have done a much better job of explaining what the hell is going on in this album, I think, but I hope you've enjoyed this one, to be fair. I should also mention as well, in regards to Trismamone, they also do a wonderful job of creating their own music as well. Triz has a whole bunch of different projects they release on Bandcamp and stuff, and I've put all the links below if you want to check out their music, essentially. Some wonderful Vaporwave stuff there, essentially. In any case, I would like to thank you for watching this baffling, strange, confusing episode of Weird Music. Look out for our next requested episode. I'm trying to work through at least one a month if I can, so keep your eyes peeled or something. It might be your suggestion, right? Hopefully it'll be a bit more comprehensible than this one, but we will have to see. Anyway, I wish you all the best. Take care, and bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.
Super, 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 super,